The first thing I'd like to do is just quick introductions. If you want to just say who you are, where you're joining us from, how long you've been involved with the project roughly, and if you want to share how many either narratives you have written for the project or portraits you have drawn for the project, you're welcome to. You don't have to do that. If you don't know the number, you can give an estimate. That's totally fine. No one's going to audit this conversation. So other than that, I just want to just kind of keep it a conversation, so if you have a topic you want to bring up, feel free to bring it up. But I also don't want this to go too long or else no one's going to watch it, obviously. So hopefully we can keep this to like 45 minutes or less. I think that sweet spot would be like 30 minutes. That would be great. So I'll just start it. Angela, why don't you introduce yourself and we'll go from there.
Sure. I'm Angela. I am joining from the thriving metropolis of Canton, Ohio, which is the Hall of Fame city, where that is. This is the state where the Intellite projects kind of started, so that's kind of a fun fact. And I have only been writing for the project for a little over a year, I guess approaching 2 years this year. And then I've only written but it's around 40 or so narratives.
Just 40.
Just
That's awesome. Thanks, Angela. Shawn, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey everybody, I'm Shawn Faust from the good old first state of Delaware. My neighbor Jeremy. I think I've been with the Intellite Project as an artist, drawing portraits for I think almost a year, maybe 6 months. That might be around right. And I think I calculated roughly about 40 drawings, 40 portraits.
Thanks, Shawn. That's great. Lynn.
Well, I was just real proud of my 20, but
Be proud of your 20.
Never mind.
Be proud of your 20.
Yes, it's not a competition.
Not a competition. No.
I am Lynn McKnight. I'm here in South Carolina. And actually, I started just helping Barbara at the very, very beginning of all of this. I'm a friend of Barbara and Teresa's, and I've actually been working in the field since, 1980 something.
Wow.
And yeah, I've seen so many changes, so many iterations, so many ups and downs, so many political brouhahas. And the thing that keeps me going is the passion for the clients, passion for the people and the families. That's really what has, I think, working with families has really been very rewarding for me throughout my professional life. But as far as narratives, I know the first one I did was, I jumped into the waters because Barbara, I think, was sick or something. And she said, could you help me with this? And I said, okay. And I don't remember how good it was, but I tried my best. But I got hooked because you can't do this without connecting to the families. You can't. And so that has been so wonderful, to just finished one yesterday, and we kind of cried together over Zoom.
Yeah. Thank you, Lynn. That's great. I really appreciate that. Elizabeth.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth.
Hi.
I'm in California, Southern California. I think I've been doing this between a year and a half and 2 years. I've created 60 portraits for the project.
Yeah. So say I know at least 40 since you did the entire California exhibition, if I'm not mistaken. It's unbelievable. Thank you, Elizabeth. And Victoria.
Hi, I'm Victoria. I'm from North Carolina. I've been involved with the project for about, I think, exactly 3 years, starting in our Pennsylvania exhibit in 2021. I've written about 40 narratives since then. I met Barbara at a writing class here in Asheville and really liked each other's work, and she asked me to be a part of the project because of my personal family history, and I was stoked, and I've been writing for them ever since.
That's awesome. Thanks. So I am Jeremy, and like Shawn here in Wilmington, Delaware, we both came on for the Delaware exhibition. Shawn, it's been way more than 6 months. I know how long it's been because I did the very first portrait that I worked on in the immediate days after my daughter was born, and she's now 15 months old. So we've been at this for 15
I
months.
must be flying.
You're good. Time's flying. Exactly.
I guess I'm trying to shoot the clock. I'm trying to say.
I just looked, and the last one I did was 41. Interesting number. So we've all been doing this, and it's really cool. And I just want to thank you all again for being willing to come together. I have been doing this social media volunteering, basically, because I'm in recovery and have been in recovery for 5 years. And so when I started getting involved with the project, I'm an entrepreneur, and I start kind of noticing if things. And so I started asking questions about the social media, and those questions ended up with Teresa and Barbara asking if I would just do the social media, which I did want to volunteer more. And I really, really wanted to focus on video content as much as possible. And I've been having these amazing conversations with mainly mothers of children who've passed from addiction or just drug poisoning. And in each of these conversations, it always comes up that, aside from Teresa and Barbara, the only people to see the submission forms are the artists and the writers. And that's kind of how this whole idea came about. Is I thought it would be really nice for the people that have gone through this project to get to know us a little bit better and hear how impactful it is for us, that it's not just like a gig or a job. And it's okay if to an extent it is, that for you. But I just, like Lynn said, I don't think it's possible for it to be that. And I know that, and one of the things I want to do is just go around and just have everybody relay if there's one story of a back and forth with a family member that really sticks out in your mind that, you took away with. And we just had local, Into Light just got great local Delaware press from Out and About magazine. And I actually referred to my one back and forth in there. One of the first portraits I worked on was Stephen McAvaney in Delaware. And I remember working with his sister, and the photo the best photo that she had of him was really challenging because he was wearing it was in dark lighting. He was wearing a black hat, and I could not see his eyes at all. And I just explained from the beginning, I said, I'm going to do the best I can here. And let's hope for the best kind of and see what happens. And, that's what I did. And the back and forths with her were really interesting. I thought I did a really good job. I was really excited to send it to her. And I got back like a 1-line email that was like, the nose and the lips are all wrong. To me, I'm putting an inflection on it. But as an artist, that's how it felt like, you know what I mean? So it's hard not to take it personally. But, I just got back and I said, could you give me a little bit more info? Do the lips need to be fuller? Does the nose need to be, could you give me more? And so, it must have been 10 back and forths over several weeks. And I kept looking at the photo and like feeling like I had already had it, but I was just going to keep doing this as much as I needed to. And, when all was said and done, the last email I got back from her was, that's my baby brother. And like that, at that moment, I was like, I would have done 500 more modifications just to get that email, and, and I was very hooked from this from the start. Just some of the first portraits I did up to the point where I started doing Into Light, I did very few portraits of people. I started my business mainly doing people's pets, dogs and cats and whatnot. And it was a challenge for me. And I was super intimidated by Shawn, who was like, my God, unbelievable, unbelievably talented. And Teresa's work was like, oh my God. But I just went for it and really like, reading the submission forms and then just kind of doing these drawings for me. Again, it was a magical time in my life. It was right after my daughter was born. And it was, a chaotic household, but, in these moments that, were kind of quiet when, everybody was napping and I was kind of in my studio with some, nice soft music playing and doing this work. It was really meditative and it was really special for me. And so that's my story to share. And I'm just going to randomly pass this. And I wanted to go like artist, writer, back and forth. So let's do this in a different order. Victoria, do you want to share a story, or do you have a story that stands out, or even a couple?
Yeah. And just to say, I just pulled up Steven's narrative and you did a great job on that portrait. It looks really good, especially from your description of how hard it was. It looks really good.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
I think one of the most memorable ones that I've written, and this is it's really hard to pick a most memorable because I've talked to, I've done several Zoom interviews with families, like you said, mostly mothers, and have just had wonderful conversations. I've even had folks send me birthday cards or like donate to my partner's GoFundMe when he got in an accident while I was doing narratives. And so like had a lot of really good connections with some of these people, and definitely cried with several of them. But the one that really sticks out to me was from the California exhibit. It was Rhonda Salinas, and hers sticks out to me because, a lot of these stories are these people that a lot of them relatively had pretty good and normal lives, like normal families, played sports, were, good in school. Like a lot of these folks have pretty decent backstories, and Rhonda's was just unbearably sad. Just reading it, the first thought in my head when I read through the transcript was like, oh my God, what do I do with this? Like, how can I put some kind of spin on this? Or, how can I tell this woman's story in a way that doesn't make people just be like, dang. And it was her sister's wife, I believe, that was the one that submitted. It was a really good friend of Rhonda's, and I had to talk to her quite a bit throughout it. And I mean, this poor woman was, mostly lived in poverty, broke both of her legs when she got hit by a car, was taking care of, I think, her aunt at the time, and she was always feeding all the stray cats, and just was like this woman who had everything taken away from her and just continued to be kind and loving and giving and supported everyone around her. And it was just one of those narratives that I was like, wow, this person had quite the life. And I still actually think of her. One of the things in the narrative that was mentioned was one of her favorite songs that her friend that submitted it also thought of her when she listened to was Easy Like Sunday Morning by the Commodores. And now every time that song comes on, I think of this woman that I've never met, but that got to see this brief like glimpse in her life. And I cried to that song several times while I was writing this narrative, like just to like get a feel for her and like how she felt towards that. And it still brings tears to my eyes when that song comes on. And I'm just like thinking of this person that I never even met, So I have a lot of stories, but that's the one that really stuck with me. This work has been really eye-opening.
Wow, that's fabulous. Thank you so much. Elizabeth.
I feel like more than and I tend to have trouble with connecting with people over like digital media. And I think more than anything else, what was extremely impactful for me was like the gift giving, because I was suddenly in this room full of people that had variations of the faces that I'd been drawing for months. Yeah. it was like it's like weird to feel like you know somebody without having met them before. And I am somebody that when I was starting this, it was like when I was just coming out of a lot of like illness after also having issues with addiction. And so I don't really know how to put it into words, how it feels to like see people that are about my age or would have been about my age that didn't make it through. And like even to see some people like this one boy, Steven, who's like in his graduation cap and everything. Yeah. And to like have gone through what I think some of the people I've drawn have gone through, and then be like hugging family members and giving this portrait. And yeah, I don't really know how to describe. I might need to come back to it in a second.
That's already great, and thank you for sharing that you also, shared some of the same struggles. Why don't we jump to Angela?
Sure. Also, I've been thinking, I think I said Ohio was the first state. It is not the first state. It was one of the first ones, but it's been a long day. It just occurred to me. My brain has finally caught up. But so I am, unlike Victoria, I've only really had the opportunity to do a couple of the phone interview, video interviews, just because my day job requires that I travel quite a lot. So I don't really have the time to, talk with people on the phone, which is kind of sad. And I feel like I did miss out a little bit on that. So most of the submissions that I've taken care of have been through only the written submission, and I usually just reach out to let them know, hey, I've got your loved one. I'm reading through it right now. If you think of any other details, just let me know. Some of them will send me like, oh, here's some extra photos I thought would be cute, or like, I forgot to include this one thing. So that's usually where most of my interactions come from, pre-editing. And then I think a lot more interactions come when I actually give them this, and then I have to somehow, so I guess for everyone who's looking at this and it's not quite aware, that we have a very like small word limit. It is 600 words, which sounds like a lot and is not. It is constantly, I say I've written about 600 words. I've actually written about like 1,000 words per person, and then it's just a matter of doing that. And a lot of times what happens when you are working with families is that we'll go from 1,000 to 597, and then we'll go up to 600 and something after a lot of because the family is still, a lot of them are still actively grieving. And this is, some things that they want to include, and they want to make sure everything about their loved one is in there, which is, it's really hard. And I've had to have a couple of not difficult email exchanges, but just have to tread carefully on where we find the line of what exactly do we want to include. And then there's also a really difficult line to walk of when families who've recently, within the past couple of years, not that it gets easier, well, it's just your life grows bigger around it, but the ones who it's more immediate for, there's a lot of anger, and it's kind of very difficult trying to parse through to make something that reflects their anger and their frustration with the situation, but also is something that they want to be able to look back on a few years and not feel like, oh, I wish I wouldn't have said that about this person or this situation. So it is really difficult to be both honest and also kind. And that's, I think, the most difficult part. But as far as ones that have stood out, I think one of the first ones I wrote, I had to Google what fart powder was, because what this girl, her name was Samantha, and her she was a prankster, and her mom included so many of the different pranks that she would play, and one of them included something called fart powder, which just is what you think it is. It just smells like farts, and I had to Google it, and I think about that at least once a month now. I don't really know why. It just pops into my head. But yeah, that was, I guess, I really enjoy all of the little details that make everybody that I mean, everybody is unique, but just the little small details that you're like, "Well, I did not see that coming." And
Mm.
that's one of the ones that just pops into my brain every once in a while.
I've always appreciated the levity, so thank you, Angela. That's great. Sean.
Oh, well, first, I'd like to express how wonderful it feels to be among this group and how privileged it is to be among, I can sense this emotional beings that I love. I love what you're talking about. And I have so much respect for those that have the gift to write. I find that that is so challenging. That's probably why I like art, because a picture's worth 1,000 words. But I do, and it also, the submissions, I read them sometimes 2 or 3 times before I begin my drawing. And I kind of don't approach it as an artist at that point. I kind of, without, I really can't avoid it, but I feel that when I pick up that pencil, that I'm a father, a brother, an uncle, a relative, a family member, and I invite that family as part of my family. And if I start bawling, I apologize. But it is, I use emotion as part of the content, just as real as paint and graphite and paper. But it's a time for me to actually kind of meditate. And drawing is a process for me of studying. It's always been a natural consequence of my affection for the subject that I'm trying to capture or portray. The history of portraiture basically claims that you're honoring and you're celebrating that subject. So I take that very, very seriously. And to be entrusted in this project is where I feel that to capture somebody's likeness is a huge privilege and honor to do. So the Intellite Project for me, after 30 years as a professional artist, this is the most rewarding part of my career. And I'm very grateful for that. And it is hard to pick out one portrait that kind of stands out, but a special reflection from one of the portraits that I thought was really interesting and quite amazing was John Hobart's portrait in Massachusetts. And it's one of the first portraits that I literally took all 3 of the submissions and combined it into one. Different parts, and it was kind of risky. You know, I totally anticipated it being returned and be like, this is very unusual, you know, but you know, I think I had the likeness and so forth, and the response was interesting. It was I've never seen, like, this is so new, and in a way, the mother said that I will never have a new version captured of my son. I won't, you know, no new photographs and we had this little back and forth with text. And I said, you know, it has to be interesting because you're seeing a first generation copy in a photograph or a selfie. Then you're seeing it reiterated through the eyes of an artist. And that's a second generation. And then to kind of take a couple photographs and put them together, it's almost like a distant third generation. So it's kind of new, and but if you capture the essence of that person, is what I'm after, then hopefully it's successful. And it was, in a sense. It was like she just couldn't grasp, like, it's just, that's him. but I've never seen that. It's just like, so that was kind of interesting. And I just had a conversation this morning with a family friend that is one of the another loved one that I'll be drawing, Ash Garrettson, and his mother Susan talked about it this morning, who happens to be friends with John Hobart's family, and that was actually what struck her as well. She said that that was an interesting thing and a wonderful thing, that I won't have anything new, but this is new, and it's a celebration of my son, and it's just to have that ability, or I guess it's a responsibility. It's just amazing, and to meet the families and to talk to them and to be at the opening we had in Delaware was just amazing. I mean, it was like it's a way that we could just hug the whole community, and it was just it's amazing. I love it. I love it.
Thank you, Shawn.
But that one sticks out. There's geez, you could have a story for each one, but
Absolutely. I'm sure we all do.
yeah.
Thank you, Shawn. Lynn, you're still muted.
You could have just let it go on and on, you know.
Yeah, we could.
I really connected with each one of you and everything that you said. I'm like, yeah. So now I don't want to just, ditto that, but a lot of sadness, a lot of anger. I've had a couple of mothers who were using, and this was a family thing. And didn't get a lot of information and needed to do some Zoom meetings. And I think one reason why Barbara chose me too is because, I am a counselor and have, I think I don't cross the boundaries. Not that any of y'all do either, but I kind of have learned how to speak with families without getting really too enmeshed with them. Anyhow, so there are lots of stories, but I thought I would just tell you one that's none of us are going to have to probably deal with because we have a new rule about not doing too many of these phone or Zoom interviews. However, this was very interesting. I got the name may come out, but I'm not going to make a big deal about saying the name. It was I got a very stark outline sent as the submission. I mean, really very stark. You'd have to make it up to get something out of that. And so I tried calling the phone number, and the phone number was actually wrong. So I emailed, and the email was somebody else's email. So I didn't have an email or at least I didn't think I had the right email. I knew I didn't have the right phone number. So what do you do? And this was a brother. So it wasn't a mother. I've only had a few brothers. And, I had the opportunity of saying, well, you know what, this just isn't going to work. It's going to be too much trouble to try to find this person. And we've got a waiting list. But by golly, I was going to do it. So I tried social media. I actually paid, what is it, that White Pages thing that says, oh, we'll give you a report for umpty dump amount of money. But I figured, well, let's try it. It didn't work. So I got on Facebook and I looked up the brother's name, and there were 36 people with that name, and none of them said, and I'm from Albuquerque, or it just had their name. So I started going through each one of them. And it was finally like on the 30th, I got to one, and I don't usually stalk, so this was very interesting. I was like, gosh, I feel like I'm looking in people's windows. But I saw one, and I immediately felt connected to this particular person, and he looked kind of like the pictures of this, our person. And so I started scrolling through, And I came to this one picture, and it was a picture. It said, I've waited 18 years to do this, but I finally cleaned out my brother's drawers. And I'm amazed at what I've found. And he took a picture of what it was. It was just a, all the little stuff that you put in drawers, right? But all of it was just so precious, you know? I mean, even the one thing that just made me laugh out loud was an unopened parking ticket. And his mother had written on the outside, "Oh, please," with an exclamation and a little frowny face with little tears on it. And evidently he never paid that parking ticket. But I felt like I knew the mom, having been a mother. It's like, what do you say? Now you need to pay this. No, you don't say that to an adult child. I guess you do, but it's not going to do any good. But her little sad face. It's just like, oh, I get it. And no names. It didn't say the name, but I knew this just had to be him. And as I scrolled through the writings, there was an old, a dear friend of this person's that said, I remember, and wrote so many things that would be perfect for the narrative. I remember backpacking. I remember he would read Shakespeare for fun. I remember just all these things. And I thought, I've absolutely got to do this one. So I wrote him, even though, I wasn't his friend, and said, I sure hope that you will open up this message and connect with me. And, I was trying to let him know I wasn't a stalker, even though I was. And sure enough, the person who I had written an email to, which was urgent, please open this, was his wife, the brother's wife, but she had not been looking at the email. So for whatever reason. Oh, and I had worked out, oh, well, they must be divorced. I shouldn't write this whole, of course they aren't, but I had in the void, I was making up my own story. So anyhow, it all came together to where he called me. I could hear a lot of noise in the background. We set up a time to talk, and we had the most delightful conversation. I mean, just, really connecting at a deep, deep level. And I got so much good information and just turned it right around and wrote it and sent it in, and boom, after months, really months of trying to find this guy. So that's my story.
What a story. I mean, I think that really shows the length that you're willing to go. And yeah, that's fabulous. Elizabeth, I wanted to circle back around to you because you mentioned you might want to think about it. Was there anything you wanted to add to what you said earlier? It's okay if not. I just want to circle back around.
I'm still not entirely sure what to say, but I can try. Yeah, because I want to come up with something usable. I mean, when you asked that question of like, if there was anyone that stood out, there was somebody that came to mind, but I couldn't think about like exactly why that was. There was just something about his expression that I felt like, oh, I know this person, His name's Jacob Alexander Lee, went by Jake. But I think it's something about, again, somebody that's like close to my age, who's into music, but also feels this like sort of feels things deeply and has like a depression thing going on in the background all the time, and like a tendency towards numbing. But like also all of this like silliness and beauty and the art just like flowing out of them. Yeah, just that was probably the fastest drawing I did. It only took me like, I don't know, 3 hours or something. And yeah, it just had something to do with feeling very connected. Yeah.
I love it.
Jeremy, can I say one more thing real fast?
Sure, of course.
All right. First, I wanted to say, in case this brother that I was talking about ever sees this, they had written a really very good submission, and somehow it got lost. And so to meet the deadline, they just wrote this real quick outline. So I'm saying that.
Gotcha.
Another thing is, Shawn, I'm an art therapist. And as you were talking, I was just so moved and struck by what you were saying. I my art is much more abstract. It would never work as a as a portrait for this, but I understand what you were saying at a deep level. I just wanted to say I appreciated what you said.
Thank you, Lynn. I appreciate that.
Well, I want to say that Shawn has been like a mentor to me, even to a point where, you know, one of the portraits I was really struggling on, and Teresa recommended this early on. I mean, I barely knew Shawn. Recommended I show it to Shawn and that he might be helpful. And Shawn, I mean, I was so floored. I mean, I was pulling my hair out on this portrait. I was really struggling. And Shawn, you know, scanned it in and used Procreate and did all the stuff, recorded everything he did into a video for me, sent it back along with, I mean, it was like, I learned more from that exchange with you, Shawn. And I think I told you this than I did going through art school. Literally, I was like, now this is all I needed.
Thank you. Well, and by videoing it, I don't have to explain it. I'm just going to show it because I don't have to talk and write about it, but you can kind of see it. So I'm a visual learner, so I figure I'll try this. So I'm glad.
Yeah.
Your work is amazing. Amazing.
I'm settling in. I'm starting to feel a lot more confident with every portrait that I do. And but you know, the one thing that's been consistent all the way through is that response. You know, when we hear back, and I'm sure it's probably similar with the writers, when you really capture this person, it's just, you know, there's nothing quite like getting that response. And it's like you would go to any length. So listen, all I wanted to accomplish with this video, like I said, is to get some engaging content. And this is awesome. I mean, like, I feel like people that are going to watch this are going to understand who we are as people, you know, and I think that's really meaningful. I think that's really special because I would imagine we've all played a pretty significant part in a really massive part of their lives. And so I can't thank you all enough for giving a little bit of time to do this.